Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Charles Sims, a seasoned tech evangelist, investor, and former CTO with an incredible 15-year journey spanning technology, sports, and entertainment. He's played pivotal roles in acquisitions totaling over $1.5 billion, showcasing his exceptional talent in navigating high-stakes, complex deals. As the former CTO for the LA Clippers, he revolutionized the team's technology infrastructure, pushing boundaries in the industry. He continued his trailblazing work as the CTO at United Talent Agency, the world's third largest media and entertainment company, driving significant technological innovation and strategic transformation. Charles excels at demystifying intricate technology concepts, seamlessly translating them into practical, real-world insights. Charles, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. Very excited to be here.
I am so glad to have a conversation with you. Technology drives so much about what we're doing. And as you've stepped out of a formal CTO role, tell us about what you're doing today, but most importantly, why it's important now.
So what I've built is a venture studio model that is advising both investors who are looking to invest in early stage AI driven heavy tech, deep tech enterprises, as well as with entrepreneurs to help them build their venture to be an investable product to get to that next stage. I originally started out building a SaaS platform that was an AI platform, 30 minutes or less. If you have an idea, you start working with it, and by the end, you have a business plan, financial model, market analysis, financial analysis, et cetera, and that became the base rock of this advisory part of my life, where it's all about following the formulas that work, empowering those who don't have their MBAs, that don't necessarily live in San Francisco, but have brilliant ideas, and really generating excitement and taking down those barriers for them.
And what you're talking about, right? Everything starts with the idea. And being able to take that into something actionable. I call it, an innovation engine, right? You ideate, you come up with it, you figure out, you test the idea, how it could work, and then you determine whether or not you're going to invest money in it.
Yep.
So with that, with your platform, you are fast tracking that with AI.
Yes, and the original goal, I wrote this manifesto as I was leaving UTA of, with AI development technology or tools the way they are, I truly think we're at a place where you can get from an idea to an MVP in 90 days or less. I created this framework to go step by step to fail fast, go through these things called jam sessions where you're just throwing whatever sticks at the wall. One of them finds it, and your goal to keep going through that formula is to try to make it fail. And if it doesn't, then you're starting to keep adding more and more fuel to the fire. And so I love some of these conversations I've had where ideas are worthless now. It's all about execution. While I agree, it's also finding the right idea and just tweaking it to something that is niche, novel, and valuable. And it doesn't have to be first either. That is another big topic I talk about. Is we're no longer in the world where you're going to think of something that no one's ever thought about before. You're going to find something that is a really clever or novel way of approaching something, utilizing something that's already out there, a way of doing that's already out there.
Well, and coming from a background in entertainment, right? Are there any actual original ideas left, right? Every movie, every story, right? They've all been told.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we continue to engage, an audience or an investor panel or a board or, fill in the blank, whose attention we're trying to keep? I love having conversations with people who truly come from a technology background because the phrase fail fast doesn't scare them.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about it with just kind of business leaders, even like marketing and salespeople, right? The idea of failing fast, well, nobody wants to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how else do we learn?
Well, I mean, from that logic, then that means if you're investing in mutual funds or your retirement, every single time the stock market goes down, sell because it's failing. It's not the long term.
Right.
It's not this idea of it's a 40-year, 50-year retirement plan or insurance when you're saying you're trying to build or reduce liability against the entire
Yeah.
portfolio. It's just usually we think project by project, and my goal when I'm either advising, say, investors or even advising entrepreneurs is you can't hold on to your ugly baby as hard as you can and it's the only everything. You have to be able to pivot, and you have to see the bigger picture and appreciate that's how you find your winner, because you're going to find it on the back of a napkin after you've been trying something that just doesn't keep working, and then light bulb hits. Now you have to be able to follow that.
Yeah. And, and I love the back of the napkin, right? Because I think we've all done it at some point or another, had that opportunity where we draw out the idea. But even if that's the piece of inspiration that takes us forward, it probably wasn't the first time we had the thought.
Mm-hmm.
What we actually execute against isn't exactly that, right? Everything evolves and morphs and changes. We have new inputs and new information to expand our decision making capability. Talk to me a little bit about something that you have guided and coached or advised on that didn't go the way you thought it was going to go.
Hmm. Too many to count. Um, I think earlier on in my advisory, I held on to the concept of I can make anything work. I can make ideas work, and you can really take an idea that sounds absolutely brilliant, but to that point of execution, one of the biggest pieces to executing in venture capital is getting capital, is being able to actually not just craft the perfect pitch, not just have a um, uh, have an idea that is hasn't been anywhere else. It's being able to translate it in a way and get those investors on board. And the first few months, I would have conversations where if it were my idea, I could easily I could easily get the buy-in from the different investors that I had in my network. But as soon as I was advising others, it was a struggle because they don't have that familial relationship or that familial knowing how to pitch, knowing how to go through those motions. And I think earlier on, a lot of the failures that I would say I came away with was not valuing what might come instinctively to some, and valuing that as something that you really have to build up on those folks. In the same way, every startup really does need both the technical co-founder or leader, as YC would say, but they do need that visionary and that commercialization officer who knows how to talk business, who doesn't have eyes gloss over. It doesn't take them 45 minutes to try to explain why their new marble is the best marble in the world, right? That that's that lesson became very apparent more towards the beginning of my time here.
I love the fact that you're calling out, I'll call it the dynamic duo, right? You have the person who has the idea and the visionary who can then make it real. So the idea and execution always have to go hand in hand, and having co-founders is a critical step in making that shortcutting some of the pain of that experience. You transitioned from sports and entertainment into investing and into an entrepreneurial world. Was that an odd transition?
It was definitely an odd transition because you go from the politics of trying to convince 2,000 people how we're going to turn the battleship to the politics of some of the most strong personalities who are brilliant at what they do, that again their baby might be a little bit uglier than they think, and it's still something we can love, but we got to shift it this way. I've been really lucky in that my origin story came from I wanted to be a serial entrepreneur. I went to business school. I had no technical experience originally coming coming into this space, and so I watched my mother, who started her own startup in aerospace, saw how kind of those logistics and operational pieces came to be, And so now, as I went from these massive organizations with massive brands to now working with two, three, maybe 20, maybe 50-person orgs, it was a huge difference. It was a huge difference in both scope and the ability to make change. But what
Mm.
I love about it is you can truly transform a company, an entire company, so quickly in comparison to a 2,000 person company.
Yeah. And I love that aha moment. I've been through, a similar journey, and I consult for the larger organizations. But when you have a 20 or a 50 person business and there's change required, making that course correction can literally happen in hours and days,
Hmm.
not weeks, months, and years. And so it is absolutely fabulous. Um, so I asked about something that, what did not go the way that you expected it to. And your first comment was too many to count. So I love the reality that you are sharing as an investor, not every investment pays off.
Hmm.
Not every business and an idea goes to market and is successful. What about something that went better than you were hoping or thinking it would?
Um, from VC, I think there's been one or two, many fewer than the failures, but there's been one or two of these. Um, uh, I happen to feel like I have no real add value to the founder. They already have their own technical co-founder, and they just need somebody to kind of like talk to. They don't have that jam session, as I say, the yes
Yep.
and jam session where you talk with somebody and you kind of just keep yes anding it. And in one night, one of the organizations that we're still under NDA right now, but healthcare app that was really struggling with. They had amazing ARR. They were really struggling with just barely getting enough runway to get to that next round. But as we all know in VC, it's all about momentum and the narrative of how your momentum is going, and trying to shift that narrative quickly so that they can go continue to raise and not have all the red flags. And one night, I happened to have two of my angel investors. They're out to drinks in Hollywood. Say, hey, what are you up to? I had them come by. The next day, one of my other health tech startups who had just got 10 million in funding. They just closed their round funding. I had introduced them, and it was like in a weekend, this founder went from, I don't know if we're going to be here 2-3 months from now, to now having a clear runway to be able to hit the next 3 years. And those deals were closed faster than any of the other ones I have done. I was a part of naturally. So the normal 6 to 9 month before your first check, they had their checks within, I think it was like 2 months. They closed all three. And then for that to be said, I wasn't a part of the deal. I just happened to be somebody who made the connections of those around, like valuing that
Yeah.
network.
Well, and that's a beautiful point, right? Brokering introductions, right? We're all one introduction away from something that is a game changer
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form for us. And being able to see those moments and leverage them and make that introduction in a weekend is, I guess the phrase, rather be lucky than good, right? Sometimes you couldn't force it if you wanted to. And the harder you tried to, the less effective you probably would have been. So,
Well, I mean, and it goes to the point of you need to not have every conversation be a sales conversation.
yeah.
I'm not trying to pitch. I try to rarely ever pitch myself. I try to rarely pitch any of our organizations, any of our portfolios. I like having conversations because there's so many things that we get involved in. It's very easy to find connections and just and make those. And what I've learned over the past years, the more that I embrace that and give an hour here, hour there to do a yes and session and make an introduction, it pays for itself 10 times, because now you have a partner, or you have somebody who's introducing you to a new capital partner in
Mhm.
sports that you need to then introduce to one of your portfolio companies. Like it really is the network effect of don't sell yourself, just have meaningful relationships.
And it is the cornerstone of everything. Authentic, real interaction will always trump out a really slick deck.
Mm-hmm.
Being credible, being real, and having and building relationships makes a huge difference, because then when you say, hey, I'd like to introduce you to each other, right, the trust and the credibility that you have with each of them makes a decision, or makes decisions easier, makes connections faster, because they're very warm. And if
You're
you're
pre-vetted, right?
right,
It's
if they trust you.
it's what I like to tell my founders of when you're trying to find when you're trying to find investors and you don't even know where to start. One of the best things is going to LinkedIn, searching GP, LP, or VC, and finding your second level connections. Choose your top 5 that you feel comfortable that you could ask for an introduction to, and and then craft up a nice email to ask them for that introduction. Because for one, the person that you're asking the introduction, it doesn't cost them anything. You're not asking them to actually invest, which is the hard,
Yeah.
weird feeling to try to sell to somebody directly. And so they get value because they say, "Oh, my network was able to do this. That's how cool I am." But now the investor is has given it's they're almost trusting the pre-vet, the pre-diligence that that person has done, and so you're already in a better position.
And one of the other things that I've learned, and it really wasn't with business so much as starting a podcast,
Mm,
right, is asking somebody for help, or asking them to make a connection or share some of their time. We as human beings are wired to want to do that.
mm-hmm.
And so finding that, hey, Charles, can you introduce me to Sally? You feel good about it.
100%.
Absolutely, absolutely fabulous. With what you're building and what you're looking at supporting, and the businesses and the founders that you're looking at supporting, what are those things that you're looking at for the impact for the future? What are those things that you're optimistic about?
Well, so one of the big ones that we did was, so Investment is the platform originally called Thunder AI that we built for if you have a business idea to get you to a full data room with your business model, blah blah blah. Blah. And quickly we realized, well, what our goal is trying to just break those barriers down. Where are other places where we could break barriers down? And serendipitously, one of our angel investors, Keith Coleman, who's also very close with the UN, introduced me to the secretary of the Global SDG Fund. And one of their struggles that they have is how do they properly vet, validate, and empower these countries to be able to ask for grants, ask for first check funding, ask for these things. And now you can take that same concept of, oh, I'm trying to make it easy for a single mother in Nebraska to take her idea and get investment for it without having to move to San Francisco. How do we take somebody who has local knowledge of their own community that they can solve a problem and make it easy for them to be able to submit it? And for the UN, reduce, and it's not just the UN, there's a couple other organizations that are now very interested, but reduce those barriers for them to have to go through thousands of applications, and be fair and be equitable to how they choose which applications work and which ones don't. So that's one I'm really excited about.
Well, and that's global impact. So I'm going to throw it out there, right? But that's legacy in the making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I had a really interesting conversation with a gentleman from one of the countries who had mentioned all of these organizations, NGOs will come in and they will talk to our smartest people, and then they will extract them out. And so they will take they'll come and create these values, and then either take the talent or take the IP and then take it out of the country. And it became a little quandary in my head of how do I help them export generate virtual GDP and export it rather than let it get stolen, let it get
Mhm.
extracted. And this is one of those things with GrantMate being able to empower them to at least get past the first finish line. And
Yep.
then the management system of how do you protect your IP? How do you protect it? Like, just it's a checklist. Just have them keep going through those things. Gamify the system so that they can do it without having to fail 4 or 5 times. So
So you have put a wrapper around the startup experience, You're in the process of morphing it to how to allow small local governments or national governments actually find ways and paths to dollars that they need to improve their communities. That's fantastic. And it's systematized and gamified. So on top of everything else, right? It's easy. In my world, we'd call it Lisa proof, and and hope that it takes people on a journey so that they're actually understanding what they're doing, learning, and over time able to repeat that.
Yeah.
Charles, if something that you've shared with the audience hits home and they're interested in learning more, where's the best place for them to find you?
Come find me at hurricanecto.com, as well as all the social handles that we are getting better at. And then our own podcast, The Next Pivot with Charles Sims, will be published here in the next month.
How very exciting. Congratulations on that journey. And thank you so much for taking us through a couple of really beautiful points. And for the audience, let's think about it for a moment. The power of a yes and jam session, right? Taking our ideas, thinking through them, building on them, and coming up with those things that we think are going to work best. And if they don't, we're going to fail fast and move on to the next thing. Charles also shared with us that it's really important to understand that there are no actually original ideas. We know that from so many different things. Shakespeare may have been the last one to be truly original, but there is a possibility to find a niche, do something that's novel, and ensure that it's valuable. So all of Charles's information are on the links below. Audience, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.